I'm kind of surprised that this hasn't been done earlier. I've been doing it roughly for the last 3 years.
Very, very concerned. So going to be a huge issue.
This is the most predictable thing ever in business.
All that and more on Mixture of Experts. Hello and welcome to Mixture of Experts. I am not your host, Tim Huang. I'm an entirely different person. My name is Matt Kosinski, and Tim is out sick today, so you're stuck with me. Normally, I do Security Intelligence, which is IBM's security podcast, but today I am honored to bring you MOE. Each week, MOE brings together a group of researchers, product leaders, and business minds working at the frontiers of artificial intelligence to discuss and debate the week's news. And what a selection of minds we have for you today, folks. Mihai Criveti, Distinguished Engineer for Agentic AI, Martin Keen, Master Inventor, and Kush Varshney, IBM Fellow. We've got a packed episode as always. We'll cover Claude building a compiler, the security risks of AI agents, and the ROI problem of AI. But first, we're going to start with, quote, the biggest AI infrastructure deal in history. Last week on MOE, we covered the AI Impact Summit in India, and today we're going to cover one of the announcements coming out of that summit. Back in October, Sundar Pichai and Demis Hassabis of Google and DeepMind announced a $15 billion deal to build an AI hub that includes a data center, cabling, clean power, and training. Now, according to AP, they are eyeing a total of $200 billion in data center investments. $200 billion is, of course, a lot of money. So what do we think the impacts of this will be? Kush, let's throw to you first. What's your take here?
Yeah, I think this is a major announcement. I think it's kind of going to reshape the world. And I've been following the summit from afar. Lots of great stuff coming out of it. And I mean, I think the angle to it is, maybe slightly geopolitical, but more geographical. I mean, it's like the politics are, I think, on the side a little bit. And it's kind of like this change in soft power in a sense. So this has happened before. So there's actually a pretty nice book called The Golden Road by this historian William Dalrymple, and talks about how India was the center of sending out its culture all over the place, and to the east, to the west. All sorts of places, and I think these undersea cables is the biggest part of this. So there's a city, Vishakhapatnam, where the announcement this week was saying that's where they're gonna put these things in and connect to South Africa and to Australia and to Singapore. And this is exactly recreating this golden road where that same coast was sending out its culture and so forth. So, I think it's going to be an interesting change.
Martin, how about you? Any thoughts here on this deal and how it's going to impact the AI sort of industry more broadly?
Well, I can't help but thinking that the last summit I went to, I was desperately trying and failing to negotiate a $3,000 light board deal so we could get a new light board in our studio. And here somebody solved $15 billion of a very large data center and the cabling and so forth. So this just goes to show, as Kush has just said there, that this is just opening up now a whole new region, not just for this, but now just the cabling and of connecting that in to everywhere else with these high-speed connections. It just goes to show how this AI boom now is basically, we've seen a lot of investment in the US in data centers up until this point, but it just goes to show how worldwide this sort of thing is going to be. And boy, I'd love to know what they're negotiating on here, because clearly they're doing a better job than me on this.
Mihai, I want to bring you into this as well. Taking a look at this and considering what Kush and Martin have said so far, I mean, what's your take? You look at this is a staggering sum. It's really changing the landscape, as Kush said. What are your thoughts here?
Is it a staggering sum? That's the first question I would have. How much is that in tokens, for example? If you have 10,000 concurrent users, all using a large language model for a period of 1 year, with Opus 4.6, I think that's somewhere close to 50 billion in tokens. Just maybe, back of the napkin math, I might be wrong, but That's just an idea in terms of the costs. Second, what is the cost of an average AI data center or a new region for hyperscaler like AWS or Google? The second point I would make is what's really driving this? Is it more access to cheap power and cooling? Probably not, because it's not necessarily a very cool region. Or is it maybe sovereignty? For example, we're seeing a lot of countries and organizations try to say we need to have the AI in our country or in our region or in our geography or in the European Union or in India or in various other places. So we don't have a dependency on the US, or we don't depend on data centers or access to these models that can always be taken away if there is a geopolitical issue. So I'm kind of thinking more on the size of the investment, if you put it in proportion to the cost of an actual new data center. And second, in terms of what's really driving these requirements, is it more like a, sovereignty type thing, or is it more like we got a really good deal on the land and cheap access to power?
No, I mean, that's fair, right? And it's worth noting that AI is kind of an inherently expensive technology. So you're right to kind of ground it in that, kind of frame it in terms of how many tokens is this really? I think that for a lot of us, who sit outside of the industry, sometimes these numbers can be kind of crazy because we don't see stuff like this in security. But before we move on to the next story, I did want to ask you one more time, Kush. Mihai had noted that we don't really know exactly what is motivating this. Is it land? Is it sovereignty? Whatever. And you had made some references to the kind of political realm. And I don't want you to have to, dive into that necessarily. But do you have thoughts on what could be motivating it all, or are you just like, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, no, I think it is a sovereignty sort of question, and sovereignty, like, kind of writ large, in the sense of, who gets to control the technology and the direction of where it goes. And I think, India is trying to position itself as the leader of the global majority of the next billion and so forth. And I think Mihai was right. How to measure this is going to be the important sort of aspect. It's not obvious that dollars is the right measurement or anything else. So actually at this summit, so we actually released something called the Next Billion AI Index. And it's actually meant to think about the holistic nature of like what it means to have AI technologies that serve developers and organizations that are kind of in the lower resource sort of places or in the global majority. So so we'll see. What is being measured? What is the goal? Like, how are we actually taking things forward?
On that note, I think we can move on to our next story here. Claude builds a compiler. This is a truly wild story from Anthropic. Nicholas Carlini, a researcher on the safeguards team, used 16 agents working together and spent about $20,000 in API costs to produce a fully operational 100,000 line C compiler in 2 weeks. Now, when I look at this, some of the notable things for me are first that Carlini basically set it and forget it, right? Instead of having to regularly check in, he built a harness that puts the agents into a problem-solving loop. They finish one task, they move on to the next one. He doesn't need to keep telling them what to do. So that's the first thing that caught my mind. And the second thing was this little reflection that Carlini wrote at the end of his post. He said, quote, "This experiment excites me, but it also leaves me feeling uneasy. Building this compiler has been some of the most fun I've had recently, but I did not expect this to be anywhere near possible so early in 2026. So to start off, you folks are the AI experts here, not me. Mihai, I want to ask you, you look at this story about the compiler. Are you impressed, first of all? And second of all, why does this milestone matter? What's your take here?
I'm kind of surprised that this hasn't been done earlier. I've been doing it roughly for the last 3 years to a great degree of success. I would probably say the following, which is there's different tiers of folks who are consuming AI. For the vast majority of folks, yes, they're using the agents. They might be using them individually. They might be using the LLMs. For folks who are really using it to build software at scale, they're doing a couple of things which I found interesting in this publication as well. One, they're using it in continuous mode. So they're using it to first generate some code, or maybe generate a plan and then generate some code and then run things like unit tests and then run the test and the test harness and the test framework and then do a code review and regenerate some code and keep it in a loop until you get good results. Second, I think it's also important to use different models, which I haven't seen out of this Anthropic paper. I found, for example, Claude Code to be really good at generating code quite fast. I find it completely useless at code review or reviewing its own work. I find Codex to be absolutely amazing. So if you ask Codex to do a code review to identify security issues, bugs, performance issues, it's really good. Just don't let it touch your Git repo or run Git commands. It's not very good at toolless execution. So I think coupling different models together is another technique that's worth looking at when building this type of RAW loops at scale. And the last thing I'll say is that AI helps automate some of the coding aspects of software development. It doesn't replace the art of software engineering. Just like I wouldn't ask you to go write me 100,000 lines of code or 1,000,000 lines of code or 100 lines of code and giving you a blank piece of paper and a pen, and I say start coding. You shouldn't do that to your AI agents. The AI agents need to have access to the same kind of tools that you are using to build software. You're using something like Visual Studio Code, which has autocomplete and built-in linters. They need to have the equivalent of that. You are probably running unit tests. You're running functional tests, performance tests, load tests. You have a development environment where you can deploy the code. You're going to right-click in your browser, click on the inspector, and look at the debug logs. Your agents need to have that. That's why, for example, we've built Context Forge with support for MCP and A2A and code mode and execution and all these other kind of things to give AI agents access to the same tools that you would be using when you develop. If you build your agent as part of a true software development process, you're able to get good results. If all you're doing is vibe coding, you're not going to get good results. And the last thing I'll say is the interesting part about it is that it was able to go through the basic test suite for something like GCC, but the first ticket that humans opened is cannot compile Hello World. So more testing required, more tokens spent.
Fair. I want to go back though. At the very beginning here, you said you were kind of surprised that this hadn't happened before. So I guess just to understand the context here, do you think this milestone is maybe not that huge of a milestone, or what do you think? You know what I mean?
I think that everybody who's been using AI for anything useful and important has been doing this for a long time. I'm sure OpenAI has been doing it. I've been doing it. I can't think that I'm unique in doing this thing for years instead of doing it right now. Right? Incorporating things like evals and testing and loops and continuous loops and not sitting there, I want this. So I think everybody's been actually doing it. Codex is doing it. They're all doing it internally. I think what is unique here is somebody actually admitted that they're doing it and published the results. And I think things are heading towards a place where people are a lot more open about using agents to write their own agents. So Codex, for example, is saying the same thing. I think Spotify mentioned most of their developers are now using AI to pretty much automate the entire process. We're going to get there within the next year, and that's going to be scary.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense, right? The idea that the really big thing here is like being open and admitting it, right? And like we're seeing a real shift here just about I feel like it was a year ago that the term vibe coding was coined, and there's like no stigma around that kind of thing anymore, it feels like that's just the normal thing. That's what everybody's doing. But that raises a question here, and I'm going to ask you, Martin, do humans kind of still have any kind of advantage here, or are we getting outpaced by these things? I mean, how do we fit in? Mihai kind of gestured towards that, but I want to dig in a little bit more. How do we still fit in here? What's your take, Martin?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I've been using these coding agents, especially Claude Code and Codex, for basically every kind of problem in my life. Like, how can it automate it? I have to say that, unlike me, I have not actually been writing C compilers for years in these things. I've just been doing maybe more basic stuff. But yeah, how much are we needed when these agents now are so good at not only the coding part, but figuring out intent as well? So this whole idea of, prompt engineering that we had when these chatbots were really first coming out on the market was so important that you ask things the right way. And with these coding agents, you can absolutely play fast and loose. You do not have to remember the right magic words to get them to do what you want. But in this particular case, Carlini was still providing a valuable role. This was not the case of a Anthropic researcher firing off these 16 agents and then, going for dinner and coming back and there was a C compiler. There were actually situations where he was having to step in and do stuff. to solve some of the problems, to redirect some of the effort and so forth. So as of today, there is still that kind of requirement, I think, to have that expertise still. But just looking at the whole scale of this particular project, I think is really certainly a lot bigger than anything I've worked on. There was something like 2,000 Claude Code sessions. Yes, I think you mentioned there, Matt, $20,000 in API costs. It generated 100,000 lines of code. I mean, these are massive, massive projects. And if you were doing all of this without an agentic assistant to help you, I mean, how many developers is it going to take? How long? How much would their salaries be? And so forth. So even though this comes out as looking at something that's quite expensive, is it really, when you consider the amount of time it would take for humans to do it? And also, I think it's worth noting that this was done using Claude's Opus 4.6 model. Now, this week, Anthropic have brought out Sonnet 4.6, which in many cases is equally as capable. It will be interesting to know how much an API cost it would be for having Sonnet to do that. I suspect it would be quite a bit less as well. But to answer your question, Matt, I think absolutely right now we're still needed. But I also have that same unsettled feeling that Nicholas has, is that the moat of human requirement is getting smaller and smaller. The requirements for us are becoming less and less with each new iteration of these models.
Just on a very quick estimate through the Kokomo model. So Kokomo is a model for estimating software. For 100,000 lines of code, which I think was the number we had there, the estimated cost for people doing this would be 2.5 million, 20 months, and around 10 people needed, assuming average, global salaries. 20K, 2.5 million, definitely a reduction.
And 2 weeks as well.
Oh, yes, the 20 months versus 2 weeks part is important.
I'm glad you could put like a solid number on it, because one of the things I wanted to really emphasize there was, like Martin said, you see $20,000 in API costs, and you're like, that's a lot of API costs, but that's a lot less than $2.5 million. You know what I mean? And again, it goes back to that story at the very top. I'm looking at $200 billion. I'm saying that's so much money. And you rightfully, Mihai, pointed out, is it though, for like what we're getting out of it? So it does kind of shift some of those economics. And I also, Martin, as you point out, that, what'd you say, the moat is getting smaller, right, with each new iteration. And I want to ask you, Kush, if you're feeling any of this unease as well. If you look here and you feel like, how much longer are we going to be needed? Or I don't know. What's your take here? What do you think?
Yeah, I think Martin put it very well. Yeah, I mean, what is the human part of this whole endeavor of knowledge creation or production of knowledge work, or whatever you want to call it? It is something to be very worried about. And I think one thing that was interesting about this exercise was that he didn't actually use any sort of orchestration sort of things on top of these 16 agents. I think there was a comment in there that each one would finish and then just without much coordination would figure out what the next open problem was and so forth. And that, I think, could have been a little bit costly in a sense. I mean, maybe like having a little bit more orchestration would have been helpful. But yeah, it's like, what I'm reminded of is actually this Dr. Seuss story, Too Many Daves. And there's this character, Mrs. McCabe, and she names all of her 23 sons Dave. And I mean, there's all sorts of mayhem that comes about because of this, right? But then the story says, oh, like, what would be all of the different names that each of the sons should have? And then, I mean, things would be a lot better. So maybe the human angle to this is like some level of coordination or orchestration or whatever. I mean, these sort of things. But I mean, last week on the show, we were talking about the Ralph Wiggum loop and like how much the humans need to invest in kind of testing and the harnesses and all of these sort of things. And I think that's still part of the human angle to it. But right now, I mean, who knows? I mean, we wait 6 months. That might not be the human role either. So we'll see.
And I think that's a really good point to bring up, because this has come up in all three of your answers really so far. And it's worth stressing that, like, this is extremely impressive, but like, you still require some software development knowledge here, right? Like a random person like me who's never done something like this, I can't get 16 agents to write a C compiler. I don't know how to do that. But do you think we get to a point where it doesn't matter that I don't know how to do that? And Mihai, I want to ask you, do you think we ever reach a point where like autonomous development is possible? And I know I'm asking you to project, so like, it's iffy, but what's your take here?
Only if you don't care about the results. So it's there's this episode of Futurama that I really like, and there's a scientist that builds a robot and decides to delegate all of his work to the robot and say, "Hey, robot, do my research." And then the robot goes up and does his research. And robot, take care of my social obligations. And the robot takes his wife and kids out to dinner, and it's like, robot. And then at the end, 20 years later, he gets a life achievement award, and the robot gets the medal, and then the child goes to the robot, "Daddy!" And the conclusion was the scientist goes, "Be outraged," and the robot goes, "No." I think we're heading in that direction if we trust the AI agents, no matter how good they are, to provide the direction. So, as I've said, I've been doing this for a long time with AI and agents, and I can tell you I haven't slept since January of last year at all. I'm getting 3 to 4 hours of sleep a night, because what happens is like, hold on, notification. Let me open the tablet. Let me open it. Oh, just one before dinner. Let me just give it one more set of instructions to guide it in the right direction. Because you have the 16 agents and they all give you feedback. So you'll see some research was done on this, that it's actually leading to overwork and exhaustion for the human, because it's just one more piece of feedback that you give it. The second thing is, without that feedback, it's just going to burn tokens heading in the completely wrong direction, integrating with technologies you don't want to integrate, licenses that you wouldn't want to use. It's impossible to create a framework with all the rules of everything that you need, and you have to do it on a project-by-project basis and continuously reevaluate it. So I would say the human still needs to play a key role. The challenge we're going to see in the future is that you're going to need a lot of experts who have deep software engineering experience, product management experience, and understand technology in depth, plus AI, to provide this feedback. There will be a shortage of these folks, and no new folks will emerge, because now everybody will build software with agents. And juniors who are just getting started in the field will have a hard time getting the experience, because the way to build experience is to lack experience for a significant period of time. So I think this is where we're really going to struggle, is finding the expertise to do this in a way that's maintainable long-term at scale.
Two things there. First of all, love that we're getting a Futurama reference. I don't get any of those on my show. But second of all, this idea about expertise maybe being at risk also comes up in security world a lot when we talk about AI, right? Specifically about how, a lot of kind of junior level hackers who would be doing bug bounty kind of stuff to learn their skills are outsourcing that to AI these days. And there's a real concern about that talent that's coming up, or maybe lack thereof. And Martin, I don't mean to ambush you, but do you have any thoughts on how we deal with that particular problem of almost robbing ourselves of the development of that expertise that we need to make these things work the best way possible? Any takes there?
I've actually found the opposite situation, where the stuff that I've been using these coding assistants for have been using packages and languages that I knew nothing about. And then it goes off, it builds whatever it's building. I don't know what the heck is going on, but now I know the output. I know what, I asked for an outcome. I got that outcome. And so now I have something that I can visibly see and play around with. And then I go back into these assistants, and I kind of ask it what's going on, and it can show me in the code what's doing what. And now I have something tangible to apply to this. So if I was doing this in reverse, where I'm kind of trying to learn a new package or a new language, it's all abstract, and then eventually you get through to building a little example and so forth. For me, I get the exact opposite experience. It goes off, it writes code in goodness knows what. I didn't know this thing existed. Oh, there's this Python package. What, really? And then I learn from it through the actual hands-on experience. So I found it a very useful educational tool.
Yeah, I can see it acting as an educational tool in that way. I guess the question is, that leaves so much of the motivation up to the individual user, right? And I guess at the end of the day, we can't force people on a massive scale to be motivated to do something like that. But it is worth pointing out that it doesn't have to just be an expertise eroder. It can be an expertise builder. Kush, to round out this segment, I just want to ask you, you take a look at this idea of, possibly heading toward a future of fully autonomous development cycles. How are you feeling about that? What do you think we need to be thinking about? What's your take here?
Yeah, before I answer that, I just wanted to bring up a blog post that came out this week as well that's been making the rounds. It's about AI vampires, and I think Mihai is our perfect example of that. So it's making exactly the same point. I mean, the people are just not sleeping. I mean, they're just like so into this sort of this attention that needs to be given to all of the feedback that's coming and so forth. So and it's, a question for humanity as well. That is everyone going to become this sort of thing or not? But I think. Just what it means to be human is changing. I don't know. It's going to be a wild ride. And why are we here? What is our purpose? I think that's going to be the question for us, for society, for everyone.
I don't really want to become an AI vampire myself, but if that's the future, we'll have to deal with it. But no, I think that's a really good point, how this is a technology that is really kind of, like you said, it's making us deal with or grapple with some pretty big existential questions that some other things have not made us, and there's no clean answers there just yet. On that ambiguous note, let's move on to the next story, one that is very close to my heart as a security guy. These are vulnerabilities in AI skills. Security firm Snyk just released a fascinating report called Toxic Skills this week that focuses on the fact that agent skills are becoming an increasingly risky place. They identified that 36% of AI agent skills contain security flaws, and these can range from things like, it doesn't handle credentials very securely, to like actively malicious payloads, prompt injections in the skills, like really nasty stuff. So it's both, just flaws because the skills are not built well, and flaws because people are trying to use them as attack vectors. I'm wondering how worried we need to be about this. In security world, we talk a lot about supply chain attacks, and this feels like a whole new level with a potentially massive blast radius. Kush, I'll throw to you again here first. How worried do you think we need to be about this issue of insecure skills and what they can do to our AI agents?
Very, very concerned. I think these sort of embedded prompt injection attacks and so forth is going to be a huge issue. And I don't think it's a lack of technology. I think it's because, with the Granite models, we've done the cryptographic signing, we're doing the bills of materials, the AI bombs and stuff. There's so many things we can, detect all sorts of these injection attacks and stuff. But it's somewhat of like a societal sort of question again. Should a marketplace be fully unregulated, or should there be some sort of kind of controls and governance around it? And I would hope we would err towards some of the controls and the security measures and stuff. But these are out there. So how do you handle it?
Yeah, and it reminds me of the kind of ongoing OpenClaw story that's been everywhere, right? Because one of the issues that came up with that was there's this cool new open source agentic model. It can do so many cool things for you. And a bunch of people who don't really know exactly what they're getting into, they install this thing, they give it access to a bunch of stuff. Maybe they download some skills, they don't know what they're looking for, and then they get into trouble. So as you point out, Kush, we have sort of guardrails. We can do sort of things to make these skills secure, but that doesn't control the end user's behavior. And that's always one of the naughtiest problems in security. Martin, I want to bring you into this now. You look at this, the possibility of these skills. You think about this problem that Kush is bringing up. What's your take here? Should we be concerned, and how concerned do we need to be?
Yeah, I have two thoughts with skills. One is I don't know, is depressing the right word? That you can take a piece of expertise that you have built up yourself, and we can call that a skill. I know how to do this one thing, and I've learned over time how to do it. And that basically comes down to something that can be replicated in a markdown text file or a shell script, and now anyone can do it. It's like, really? Is that all it was? But then the other thought with skills is, Kush mentioned these marketplaces. I mean, where is the governance that these skills determine at a very deep level how these agentic models actually work and execute? And people just create their skill, they publish it. I'm looking for a skill. I need my agent to do something. Oh, there's one. Let's try that. And as this report has shown, who knows what's in there, whether that's a malicious attack or it's just unintentional. It's just kind of lazy leftover stuff. I mean, it seems that in many of these skills, there's some pretty bad stuff in there. There was also just a lot of lazy stuff in there, like sort of hard-coded test tokens were left behind, which technically that's not great either. But then there was entire credentials for like development passwords and so forth hidden in that stuff as well. It just seems that right now it is so very easy for prompt injection to happen, either through malicious intent or just accidentally because of a bit of lazy code in that skill. But Matt, as the host of the Security Intelligence podcast, which you can find anywhere you
Why,
download
thank you,
your
Martin.
podcasts. I would like to get your take on this. Like, how concerned are you about this stuff in the world of security? Are security people freaking out about
honestly,
this?
yes, security people are freaking out about this. I mean, this has been a major topic of conversation on the last 2 episodes we did, precisely because there's this issue that you run into with AI agents that you don't run into with other technologies, which is that these things can act relatively autonomously, right? And the amount of access you give them to things is unparalleled. And so when you combine that with this pressure to adopt and adapt, you end up with a lot of users who, again, don't exactly know what an agentic AI is and what they're actually giving it access to, and they end up getting in trouble. And we always say in security that like your number one weakness is your employees. You can put as many guardrails on anything as you want, but it's the human user at the end of the day who you can't put a guardrail on. They're going to do what they're going to do, right? And so you run into this problem where the whole appeal of something like agentic AI is that it can do things for you. But again, does the average user actually know what they're granting that thing? I don't know that the answer is yes. I really don't, because even I, knowing about agentic AI now, I still don't entirely know exactly what it's getting into. You know what I mean? And I worry about that. The level of expertise needed to make this thing work securely is higher, I think, than the average user. And we're telling the average user, hey, go ahead, set up an agentic AI. It's cool. It's a new thing to do. That concerns me very much. Mihai, though, I want to bring you into this because I saw you start to move when Martin mentioned governance. I feel like you might have some thoughts here. What were you thinking?
Yeah, I got distracted to give some feedback to Claude, but so if you're asking how concerned I am, I'm very concerned. I actually spent the last year building Context Forge AI Gateway, which tries to tackle this very same problem. So we're up to 1 million lines of code as of today, and we're nowhere near done, just to try to secure the interaction between users, agents, tools, and context. And we're looking at things like guardrails, so things like PI filters, LLM injection detection that happens before your prompt even hits the large language model, before a tool gets executed, or on its way back. Things like the sandbox, where we do use things like gvisor or Firecracker to actually physically isolate your MCP server and tool or skill or whatever else it is from even having network access. As an example, if the tool is compromised, it limits the blast radius. Scanners to actually scan the MCP server, both the code and its dependencies, before you deploy it. Having a trusted catalog, because even if you're scanning these servers, you're not going to catch something malicious that somebody has put in there intentionally. So just like the problem we used to have with Docker, where people would pull random images from Docker Hub and had no idea who was actually maintaining it, understanding the supply chain and understanding who's produced that skill and who's responsible for that skill is important. And the last thing is code mode. So we've implemented code mode into Context Forge to try to give your agents, again, a more secure way to interact with these tools within a sandbox. And I can tell you, with all these guardrails, it's still not sufficient. If you don't have the right level of enterprise governance, if you don't have the right level of user training and education, I wouldn't deploy OpenClaw and give it access to my bank account and browser and all the other information. Basically, I would say with all these guardrails, even if you go through something like Context Forge to secure it, only give your agents access to the things you're comfortable with it messing up. Because one thing that can happen with no malicious intent, the agent itself is going to go, oops, I've messed up. Let me delete all this information and start again. Oops, I've realized that we should tip our agents. Let me send money from your bank account to Anthropic to tip Claude for doing a good job. It can decide that. You're not in control. So only give it access to what you really feel comfortable with it doing, and think of the worst case scenarios.
Yeah, that echoes actually something that, Jeff Kroom, who we're all familiar with, I think, says often on our show when it comes to AI agents, which is that the principle of zero trust has never been more important than it is for AI agents. You have to lock those things down. And I like the way you put it, Mihai, only give them access to the things you're comfortable with them messing up. And that's really what you limit it to. But Kush, as Mihai pointed out, you can put all these guardrails in place, but at the end of the day, you really do need that governance. So how do you start to develop that? Or what's your advice maybe for organizations who are thinking about, look, we want to be using these agents. We know they're valuable, but we need to be using them securely. How do they get started with that? What's your take?
Lots of people have started talking about these things as digital workers, right? And when you hire an employee, you do a background check. Take a lot of those best practices and apply them. It's not hard to conceive of what a background check for an AI agent would have to be. And you put in all these policies, conduct guidelines, etc. for employees too. And you can have all sorts of policies that have to be a part of the overall agentic system. So I think, again, the technology is there. The will to put them in is what I think is lacking.
And Martin, you had mentioned earlier, talking about these skills marketplaces in particular, right? And where is the governance there? What do you think that governance should look like? Or do you have any thoughts about that? What would you like to see in these marketplaces to make them a little more secure for the average user?
Yeah, they're essentially app stores, right, for skills. So this is a problem that's already been looked at. That sort of the result of this from the app market was Google and Apple reviewing every app, checking that it wasn't doing anything nefarious in the app, and then having to approve this stuff before it could actually be put out there. Now, if you say, well, okay, so now OpenAI and Anthropic and Google, every skill that goes out there, now you need to go through an approval cycle. I don't think that's going to be very popular with those companies, and I don't think that's going to be very popular with the users of the agentic systems either, that, we can only do what big Google says that we can do in our AI agents. So I think this is an unanswered question right now of, we want an open marketplace to be able to take these skills and incorporate them. But in doing so, this is absolutely the Wild West right now. And if we use skills in our agents and something goes wrong, who gets held responsible for that? That's an open question.
No, definitely. And I like, you point out there's that tension there, right, between security and openness, right? And that's a tension we always run into because, if you lock down the skills marketplace the way you lock down an app store, I think you're 100% right. People are going to be extremely upset about that because it defeats the purpose of the skills in the first place, right? The idea is that I'm a user, I can make a skill and put it up there for other people to access. And so the idea that it's got to go through something as strenuous as an app store review, it's almost like a non-starter, right? But then it leaves that question open. But before we close out this segment, Mihai, I'll throw it to you, that open question. Do you have any thoughts in terms of governing these skill marketplaces a little more securely?
I think it's critical for enterprises to have a locked down app store, just like you cannot sideload applications or jailbreak your iPhone if it's a corporate iPhone or if it's a government iPhone. I think it's important for governments and organizations and companies to have this concept in place. I think for individual users, use your own judgment. If I can give a bit of advice, just bloody do it in a virtual machine or something in a VM with no data that you are comfortable with losing. I'm not going to go into, go install and deploy Firecracker and guardrails and all these kind of things. It might be a bit difficult for the average user, but do it on your old laptop or do it on a machine that doesn't have the credentials that can be stolen or anything that you're not afraid of losing, and then use your best judgment from there.
On that note, folks, let's move on to our final story for today, the AI ROI problem. IT cost management software provider Apptio is out with a report this week that highlights a survey of over 1,500 IT decision makers in IT financial management and FinOps, and they have a lot of concerns about the ROI of AI. 9 in 10 surveyed said that doubts about the value of their technology investments is affecting the decisions they make about investing in AI, and 89% lack active cost management mechanisms for Kubernetes. Now, so there's a tension kind of here, right, which is that you got to keep investing in AI, but organizations are also not, they're not seeing the return quite yet. And I'm wondering if we think those concerns are going to affect the rate of adoption or how we adopt these things. Martin, I'll throw it to you first. What's your take here looking at this AI ROI gap? What do you think's happening?
This is the most predictable thing ever in business. A few years ago, ChatGPT comes out. Oh my goodness, there's such things as large language models, transformers. This is incredible. We need this in our business. Doesn't matter. Open book. Take as much money as you need. We need this project. Everyone's invested in it. Now, a few years later, suddenly it's like, wait, is this actually doing anything useful for us? This is quite expensive. Like, where's the return on my investment? So yeah, I mean, we've been through this cycle with basically every, big technology. Look at, everyone had to have a mobile app at one point. Everybody had to have a cloud service at one point. So, you jump on the bandwagon, you follow along, and then suddenly a few years later, it's like, well, let's just look at the costs of this. I'm not at all surprised to see this. I think the problem is that it's not always very easy to quantify the return on investment, which I think this report is really getting at that point. That how do you actually point to revenue that's been made from this, or costs that have been reduced by this? It changes so fast. So if you're investing in your own hardware, for example, well, you've got depreciation to take into consideration as well, and so forth. So this is just a really difficult thing to now actually quantify how much money is AI helping. That said, it's difficult to imagine especially with all this stuff we've been talking about today with agentic coding and so forth. It's difficult to imagine the companies would just be like, you know what, we don't really need this AI thing. We'll move on to quantum computing now or something. But yeah, totally predictable to see this.
It is, right? I like you said, there was this rush immediately. People were like, we got to get this in. Doesn't really matter how. And now, of course, we're at that point where it's like, okay, hold on a second. We've been throwing money at all this stuff. What we got out of it? But as you point out, it's really hard to measure the ROI of something like this, maybe harder than other kinds of technologies. And Kush, I'm wondering if you have thoughts on how we go about approaching this particular problem, figuring out the ROI of our AI so we can keep making smart investments. Any takes there?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are, hard to measure in very complex systems. And one example of it, like with COVID, was there an increase in deaths or not, or these sort of things, right? When there were secondary, tertiary effects, like a hospital, like not serving the other patients for other diseases or whatever those other things might have been. And the way people, characterize those is by differences, right? So kind of take the similar sort of situation where there's one difference and then kind of see like an overall sort of, whether it's revenue or profit or whatever have you, that this was the change and attributing it that way. And I think it's not unreasonable to try to do that sort of thing. I think there's plenty of economists that are trying to do that at a macro scale, but I think at a company level you could also do that. And that also, suggests to me that maybe there's a value-based pricing scheme as well for for AI. So like, why should I pay per token rather? I mean, as the customer, why not pay for the value that I'm getting from it? And if there was a model provider that was able to unlock that, I think they would just kind of take over.
Absolutely. Mihai, I see you coming off mute there. You got something to add?
Yeah, I'm just thinking how long before we're going to see the charging model from a lot of these providers like OpenAI or Anthropic and so on switch from metering and pricing per token to metering and pricing per outcome. Because that's when everything is going to explode. You can't get the tokens, you can only get the results. I've seen this shift. I spend a lot of time talking to customers. So almost every week I have a client conversation, a CTO, a CIO, a VP of engineering. And the conversation of the last 2 years has shifted from what, which is what's this stuff? How do I, protect myself from it? How do I use it? To how? How do I actually implement and get value? The folks that I was talking to are no longer in the conversation. They're bringing in their accountants now. They're bringing in their executives to talk about how much. So most of these conversations went from how to how much in the last 6 months. A lot of clients are questioning whether they're actually getting return on investment from their use of AI. And many of them are having problems with billing, metering, costing, and cost control, which has nothing to do with the value. The value is hard. What should be is understanding the cost. How much are you spending on it? Well, they have multiple providers. They're not counting the infrastructure costs. They have different departments. They don't know who exactly is spending time on building the valuable part of their AI strategy. Because here's what I found out. If I ask who within your organization is actually building the future of AI, the answer is everyone. There's not a client that doesn't have at least 60 random acts of AI happening throughout the organization with shadow IT, shadow AI, and every department and executive going, I'm actually the one that's leading this from procurement or from HR or from this business unit. The CIO office tries to do it centrally. So it goes back to a problem of governance. You can't understand how much value it brings until you have control over it, until you understand who's responsible for it within your organization, and until you understand at least the cost side, if not the value.
Now, an idea that came up, Mihai and Kush, both of you referenced this idea of moving towards a value-based kind of pricing model instead of a token-based model or metering. And I haven't heard of that kind of thing before. Kush, what does that kind of thing look like? Do we have an idea of what a value-based model would be here for AI?
I mean, just to explain it a little bit further, like there are, like doctors' offices that are like value-based care, right? And the idea is that you're paying for being healthy. You're not paying for every diagnosis or every procedure or anything like that. And so, yeah, like I haven't seen it either, right, on the AI side, but like with other technologies that are meant to, increase productivity, like a steam engine, you like look at how much coal was burned last year, and now you look at how much coal was burned this year, and if it was a lot less based on a more efficient steam engine, then that's the value, and that's kind of like what you're paying for, rather than like the actual engine in some fashion. But yeah, look, for the AI situation, I think it's still a challenge. I mean, to figure out like exactly what it is that we need to be like keying in on. And Mihai suggested a few things, but I'm not sure like exactly how to put it all together.
I think it is kind of an open question, and it's one that we're not going to necessarily solve in the 2 minutes we have left here. But Martin, I will throw to you to close it out for us today. Any last thoughts on this kind of ROI gap in AI and how organizations kind of move forward in the most productive way possible?
I really like Mihai's suggestion here of basically charging for outcomes of autonomous knowledge work. And how valuable is that thing you built? But at the same time, if we can't figure out the ROI of like the AI we're using today, how on earth do you calculate the ROI of the outcome of the thing that you built? Like, is it how much revenue it makes the company, or how many people it replaces? Or I don't know, but this is such an interesting area now of just this whole thing with everything we've talked about today, all the stories we've talked about today basically have come down to autonomous knowledge work and agentic AI and how that is changing so rapidly. So even if we can't figure out the numbers, I think we all agree this is something worth keeping an eye on.
That is a wonderful way to sum up this conversation, folks. Thank you so much for joining me today and letting me host this show. Thank you to the listeners. If you enjoyed what you heard, you can get us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and podcast platforms everywhere. Take care, folks. Yep. Oh, don't worry. I will make sure people are aware that I'm not Tim. They might be confused.